Humble obeisances, Maharaj. Thank you very much for joining today. It's a pleasure and honor to have you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
It's my pleasure to be with you again, Prabhu.
Yes, Maharaj. Now, this Dashavatara, it was very sweet what we did last time. And quite often, till now, in the Monks podcast, we have been discussing more contemporary and analytical topics. Of course, our discussion of Dashavatara was also analytical, but the core topic was itself quite scriptural and devotional. So many devotees have appreciated that. And said, as we move forward to the later avatars, they are looking forward to it more and more. Probably when we come to Krishna, we will have a lot to discuss. So thank you very much for sparing your time.
Yes.
Thank you very much for sparing your time.
My pleasure.
Yes, Maharaj. So
yeah, we are. This is churning the nectar.
Yes, Maharaj. So yes, last time we discussed about Matsya, the first. So should we discuss about Kurma today, Maharaj?
Why not? Why not?
Yes. So
yes.
Do you have some framework, or should we go according to the Bhagavatam? I thought of 2-3 things. I thought of one way is we try to look at what are the distinctive features of each avatar, or the Leela of each avatar, and then we could highlight those. Or we could just go linearly along the pastime and discuss various aspects as they come up. Or do you have any structure in mind how you would like to do this?
I don't have myself, so you're welcome to go as you are inclined. You said you have 2 or 3 thoughts.
Yes, Maharaj.
To start with, yeah. So let's go with that.
Okay. So one way I thought is we could look at what are the distinctive features of this avatar, and then we could go along linearly after that. So
okay.
One of the things I noticed is that from what I read, Kurma, does he ever talk? Does he? Certainly there is no instruction that Kurma gives, but
I was thinking about that also. And I was trying to remember, I didn't have time to check whether there's some direct speech by him.
As far as I could see,
there's a verse in the there's a verse in the 12th canto, but I don't think it's Kurma speaking directly. It's talking about the itch on his back. Those who those who read the Bhagavatam are blessed by the Lord who had an itch on his back, something like that.
Yeah.
But no, I was thinking about that also. He's a very silent avatar.
That's true. So I also did a quick search in the Bhagavatam. We don't see him speaking per se. So that was one feature. Another feature is that the Kurma Leela has many other avatars also coming in. They may be one of the Dashavatars or they may not be the Dashavatars. But there are other manifestations of Vishnu also that appear. Mohini Murti comes immediately.
Yes.
Also Ajita who comes, who holds the Mandara from above. So in a sense, this is like this is probably one of the few pastimes where we have multiple avatars populating the same pastime.
And cooperating with each other.
Cooperating. That's a good word. I was thinking that I think Ram and Parshuram meet in the Ramayana and they have a conflict. So then Ram sends Parshuram away to the mountains basically. So cooperating is quite striking. There are no other places where avatars meet per se, leave alone cooperate. Actually, each avatar has his own time. So then each avatar has his own time. So they will they'll come at their time and they will go. So in that sense,
Yeah.
their cooperation becomes a little unlikely. So
Yes, maybe, perhaps in the spiritual world, they're all together discussing. Okay, Nrsingadev, it's your turn to go.
your turn to go. That's interesting. As far as I remember, the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, there is a I don't know if people from one Vaikuntha planet go to another Vaikuntha planet. The Gopakumar goes because he is evolving, but in the
Yeah.
spiritual world, whether the Ayodhya Vasis go to Dwarka or Dwarka Vasis go to near the other Vishnu planets, that would be we don't have that much specific descriptions from what I have seen, isn't it?
No.
Mm.
No, and I was just reading a couple of days ago in Brihad Bhagavatamrita. There's this very interesting situation in Goloka where Kaliya serpent reappears in the lake, in the Hrada, and Krishna goes after him to have some more fun. And of course, all the residents, all the Brajvasis are again totally disturbed. And eventually Balaram comes and he pleads with Krishna to stop putting everyone in such distress. and his reason is, these are the Brijbasis. These are not the residents of Dwarka or Vaikunta. They could, those residents, they might be able to manage, so to say. But here, the residents of Braj, it's too much for them. You're destroyed, it's too painful. So please stop. So he's making that very definite distinction between the residents.
That's fascinating.
On the other hand, this is getting off the subject of Kurma, but it occurs to me that Srila Rupa Goswami, doesn't he explain that that the wives of Krishna are expansions of the gopis?
Yes.
That Rukmini is Chandravali and
Satyabhama is Radharani.
Sorry?
Satyabhama is Radharani.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. So there is some interaction definitely, but
so some kind of connection is there.
Yes, that's true. And of course, Krishna meets Mahavishnu in the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam when he's trying to get the Brahmana's son. So now Mahavishnu is not exactly an avatar.
Yeah.
Mahavishnu is more of a universal administrator. So
now
one reason we could say that why there's an interaction with Parshuram is because Parshuram also has a long life. According to some traditions, he's still living. So, but at least at the Bhagavatam says he's still living. So that could be one factor. Now,
yes.
In one sense, if we see that from Matsya to Kurma, it's more like from water to land. Matsya is more of a aquatic and Kurma is more amphibious. So although there is no description of Kurma coming on the land, he's quite huge. So Kurma and Matsya both are, relatively speaking, quite huge avatars.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. And I looked it up in one book. tortoises, turtles in general, tortoises, also these seagoing tortoises. Apparently, they need to come up for air. They're not actually fish, but they can stay underwater as long as half an hour.
Okay.
So yeah, amphibious. So we talked about this. Was it Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur or was it Bhaktivinoda Thakur who made this suggestion of the avatars being indicating a kind of evolutionary development?
Yes. I think both of
Or
them,
reflecting an evolutionary development?
yeah, both of them talk
Both,
about it.
okay.
Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur talks about it in one of his conversations with his with that English British professor who has come to meet him, and Bhaktivinoda
Uh-huh.
Thakur I think mentions it. I don't remember which book it is in now. So the way he puts it is more that it's more like a creative correlation rather than a substantiation of evolution per se. That even the avatars,
Right.
the idea like Prabhupada also correlated evolution with spiritual evolution. So it seems that
Yeah.
although the word had different meanings in the Western academic or scientific sense, the word is used by our acharyas creatively in different ways. So
Yeah.
Prabhupada uses
Yeah.
it more for the
They're using it more in a playful way.
playful way. Okay, yeah, that's. Would you call Prabhupada's usage also as playful? Because Prabhupada applies it more for the soul. The Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur and Bhaktivinoda Thakur apply it more for the like the avatars. So I think that might be a little more playful. Prabhupada's uses talking about a philosophical truth of the soul's evolution. So
Right.
yeah. So,
Yeah, of course, Prabhupada is speaking of development of the soul's consciousness
yes,
over time as a kind of evolution.
that's true. And when we talk about when you say playfully, it's basically he's saying that the idea of evolution, okay, it's here also. That doesn't necessarily mean that we support the biological way evolution was proposed, but that concept itself is over here. So is it that the Lord chooses to manifest in a particular historical sequence, which is reflective of the evolution of human, of not necessarily of the evolution of consciousness? Because last time we discussed that aquatics are put at the lowest level, and then it's interesting when he's talking
Yeah.
about Varaha also. Hiranyaksha refers to him, at least Prabhupada translated it as an amphibious beast. So when Hiranyaksha is referring to Varaha, oh, an amphibious beast. So he recognizes Vishnu, but he says you have come as an amphibious beast. So both of them are amphibious, but then but a Varaha seems to live more on the land also. I mean, a boar lives much more on the land than a turtle.
Yeah.
So we could say that there is some kind of
Yes, we
Yes. Sorry, you are saying
we
something?
have boars living. We have boars living in the forest right next to where I'm living right now.
Oh, okay.
And you can see their tracks in the mud.
Oh,
I go for walks here and in the forest. You can see their tracks.
interesting.
So they're very much land animals.
Yeah.
So about evolution, my understanding is our acharyas would say, well, everything comes originally from the Lord. So the notion of evolution, that's also coming from the Lord. And so the Lord is appearing in this sequence, and this is indicative of a progression, which then we are perceiving in a different way, in the modern way, that different forms of life are developing over time.
So we could say it's
and so the acharyas would be saying that any idea of evolution that we have, you can trace it back to the Lord's, but there you will find it's a very different idea, because it's not that something new is developing, but rather there's simply a sequence of appearance.
Yes. So it could almost be said that like the great saints, they remember Krishna, they see everything and remember Krishna. So it is the acharyas look at the theory of evolution also, and they remember the Lord by looking at the Lord's sequence. So it could also be seen more like a uddipan for remembering Krishna. Like one way is that everything comes from Krishna. Another from that, So now the Kurma is, I've seen it is often associated with stability. I think even Bhaktivinoda Thakur told Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur to worship Kurma Dev in his childhood. He had his own deity.
Yes.
So now when the churning begins, so there is like we're talking about multiple incarnations, the demons and the devatas are fighting, and then devatas go to Vishnu, and Vishnu tells them to make a truce. So that is the first intervention of Vishnu, but that is more of a standard cosmic intervention. Wherever the devatas are in trouble, they go to Vishnu. But then when they start the churning, Bali is there and Indra are there, they start churning. So at that time the Lord appears, and there is no specific description that the devatas or anyone is offering prayers to him or glorifying him, at least not in the Bhagavatam from what I know. So they just start churning, and then the Lord seems to be there to stabilize. So to stabilize the the churning rod. So it seems that this churning has a lot of metaphorical significance also in many different ways. And so the Lord, it's the ocean that is being churned, but the Lord is helping the ocean to be churned. So we could say that in one sense, if we consider the ocean to be like our heart, and the Lord is also present in our heart, and whatever we do to try to purify our heart, all our efforts are ultimately sustained by Him itself. So that is the Lord's presence which enables the churning. And then the churning rod, from what I have not seen Prabhupada developing the metaphorical explanation so much, but I have seen other devotee speakers talk about it quite a lot. So in general, it seems Prabhupada did not go too much into metaphorical explanations. Is there any reason that you feel for that?
The reason I see is that Prabhupada wanted to emphasize literal explanation, because he wanted to get away from the idea of reducing everything to fantasy and mythology. He would often say something like, this is itihasa. Itihasa means history. And he would equate it. He would actually identify all of the pastimes, everything in the Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, as historical fact. We know he would emphasize with the Bhagavad Gita that there is a place called Kurukshetra. This is where there was a real battle. It's not to be, he was, of course, arguing especially against Mahatma Gandhi, who was taking it in an allegorical way.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think we talked about this before. We know Bhaktivinoda Thakur does speak about he does give allegorical meanings to Krishna Lila. And why he's doing that is an interesting question also. I think there may be an historical element to it. I mean, a historical factor of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's particular time and who he was who is in the background of his culture, especially what's his name? I'm forgetting his name. Chatterjee. Bankim Chatterjee. Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, yeah. Who wrote a book called, I think, Krishna Charita.
Yes.
And in that book, he tried to, he sort of bowdlerized. He tried to,
That's a good
clean
word.
up what he thought was not pure.
Yeah.
It's called bowdlerization.
Yes.
And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, around the same time, he's writing what he's writing. And he's saying, yes, you can take Krishna's pastimes allegorically to a certain extent, but he's saying that it seems he's saying that doesn't mean only allegorically. They're also literal. So Krishna kills Agasura. There is a demon, Agasura. Krishna kills it, and so on.
Yeah.
But why Srila Prabhupada emphasized the literal, this was his mood. He was relishing everything in a mainly literal way, but not only literal, because we see sometimes in a purport he will give a kind of, not explicitly, but he will give a purport that's suggesting an allegorical meaning. The one kind of famous example comes to mind from Canto 8, Gajendra Leela.
Yes.
Gajendra is fighting the alligator. Krishna, and Prabhupada speaks about this lake as in an allegorical way in terms of ashrama. When he says one should be in a situation, in an ashram situation, which is favorable, in which one can be most strong for serving Krishna. That he's taking Gajendra as an example of one who is in a situation in which he was disadvantaged.
Yes.
So that's a kind of allegorical interpretation.
Yes, I think Prabhupada also in the 10th canto is talking about the children of Devaki. He says the 6 children who are killed represent the 6 anarthas. And then after that,
yeah,
Master comes.
That's there also. That's from the Acharyas, from Vishwanath Thakur,
Yes.
I think.
Yeah, but Prabhupada does repeat that. From what I have seen, Prabhupada doesn't in the Krishna or in the 10th canto, whatever purport is written, Prabhupada doesn't refer to Bhaktivinoda Thakur's description of demons in Krishna Lila in allegorical terms. So I haven't seen Prabhupada refer to that.
No, I don't think so.
So what you are giving 8th canto example is, we could say, what Prabhupada does himself. So it's not that Prabhupada is quoting Acharyas, but Prabhupada is doing it himself. Yeah, that's significant. So we can say,
I think we could find other examples.
yes. I'm sure.
But I can't think of any now.
Yeah. Prabhupada does, Prabhupada sometimes does very direct, it's not, I don't know whether you can call it allegorical. The 7th canto, when there is that verse which Prahlad Maharaj says, my senses are pulling me in different directions. Jivvaikto achyuta vikarshati ma vitrupta. So my tongue is pulling me in one direction, eyes are pulling in another direction, the ears are pulling in another direction. So Prabhupada directly makes the translation over there as, the ears are attracted to radio songs. So that is, so I think it's almost like a very implied, the ears are attracted to some attractive music, Prabhupada makes it radio songs over there. So we could say that,
Yeah.
So in one sense, the essential point is to make the teaching relevant. So if sometimes the way to make it relevant is to emphasize the literal, that's what can be done. If sometimes the non-literal is the way it makes it relevant, then that can be done. So while you're mentioning Maharaj,
yes, exactly.
Yes, Maharaj. So while you're mentioning, I was thinking, what is the difference between, say, metaphorical and allegorical? So from what I understand, allegory refers more to a story. There's a whole long narrative, and the story itself symbolizes something.
Yeah.
Say maybe like the Pilgrim's Progress is an allegory. Is it or no?
Yes. Allegory is a narrative. It's generally a narrative, my understanding.
Yes.
And there can be also extended analogies. So, for example, the 8th chapter Adi Lila Chaitanya Charitamrita is an extended analogy of the tree of Chaitanya's associates.
Yes, that's true.
And it's an analogy, and it's extended, which means it goes on many. It can be used in many different ways.
True, so true. So we could say that allegory usually involves a story, and sometimes within a story, you can also have metaphorical elements. So a particular point represents particular thing. That would be metaphorical. And so then we could broadly call all of these as allegorical or metaphorical. All these we could call as non-literal readings. We could all put them in the in the category of non-literal.
But we also have, in the Bhagavatam, we have at least one explicit allegory, and that is the story of Puranjana.
Yes, Puranjana, yeah. And it's specified also beforehand that it is an allegory. So
it's very explicit.
Yeah. And
it's explicit, and then after it's described, then he goes back and he identifies every element of the story as meaning this, that, and the other thing.
Yes, that's true. So it does seem that in the past, often allegory was a frequently employed tool for teaching. Jesus uses parables, but he also uses allegories at times. The prodigal son would also be an allegory. So Now, when we say Bhaktivinoda Thakur represents, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that Putana represents a false guru. So, would we call that as a metaphor, or would we call that as allegory?
I don't know. It's because it's a narrative, I would say you can keep it in the category of allegory.
Okay.
Yeah. The thing is, there's also a sense in which allegorical narratives, you have personifications of abstract concepts. And so that's very much the case in all of these stories of Krishna killing the demons. But another example is Chaitanya Chandrodaya Nataka of Kavikarnapura, in which there's the personified bhakti, personified dharma, personified Kali, personified adharma. Is there dharma? There's adharma in any case. There's personified friendship, and so on.
Yeah, okay.
So that's I would say that's kind of classical allegory, where they are speaking as Kali, as adharma, and so on. That's their whole identity.
Yes. So then the story of the...
There's also the story in Padma Purana, the story of Bhakti Devi and Jnana and
Vairagya.
What is it? Jnana and yoga? Vairagya. Yeah, Jnana and Vairagya. Yeah. So that's definitely allegorical. Now, I personally see also the story of the cow and the bull in the first canto with Kali. There's also a strong allegorical element there.
Yeah. Now this raises a few questions that in our tradition, we also consider Bhakti to be a goddess. So there is or at least we have Vrinda Devi, who is there in Vrindavan. We have Yogamaya. I don't know whether Gopal Champu actually talks about Bhakti Devi as a person specifically, but Bhakti Devi does seem to be a presence in our tradition. So are we saying that Bhakti Devi, when we say the story is allegorical, can we also have, if we have historical characters in non-historical roles, then that can also be allegory? Because it does seem, just to go back to your the last point which you mentioned about the story in the first canto, there is a historical character, Parikshit Maharaj, who seems to meet this cow and bull. And then there is also I don't know whether we call Kali also a historical character. So Kali is considered to be either a being of some kind. I don't know whether every other yuga also has their personified being. Is there Satya and Dwapar and Treta?
The personality of Satya. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I think what's happening is there's a lot of blurring of categories to the point where it sort of doesn't matter anymore. You just become absorbed in what's happening in the narrative, and you don't really worry about, is this historical? Is this allegorical? It doesn't matter anymore. Cows and bulls are speaking perfect Sanskrit. Why not? Everything is possible.
Okay. So in a sense, we need to become bhavagrahi, or saragrahi rather, saragrahi,
Yeah,
essence seekers. Mm. And,
yeah.
and it does seem that from what I had said,
Saragrahi.
saragrahi, yeah.
Vishnu is bhavagrahi. We want to become saragrahi.
Yes, true. So it does seem that this question doesn't even, it doesn't really exercise the previous acharyas. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he does explain in his commentaries are not very big, but in his Bhagavad commentaries, wherever there is anything which might be a little confusing, he does address that. Okay, this character is saying like this, but this is what it means. But this question, he doesn't address it. So it seems that, like what you said, it it didn't matter for them so much.
Yeah, it's hard for us to go back to that time to sort of to really understand how the acharyas were thinking.
Yeah.
And maybe we're not supposed to. But from a mundane perspective, you could say, well, we're talking about basically pre-modern culture and certain issues that for us are very important were simply not issues at that time. And similarly, things for us, maybe 200 years from now, they'll say, why these people were not thinking about this or that? Something else they'll be very worried about.
Yeah, that's true.
So this is one aspect of changing times.
Yes.
Back to Kurma,
Yes, Maharaj.
if I may.
Yes, please. Yeah. I
Since
think
we're talking about Kurma.
we went on this whole detour because I mentioned that Kurma represents stability. And then we discussed whether that Prabhupada didn't mention metaphorical meaning so much. So that's how we went. I think it was relevant, but yeah, let's come back now. Thank you.
Well, speaking of stability, in Vaishnav ritual, one of the first steps of performing Archana Puja in the morning is to establish the asana. Om asana mantrasya meru prishti. I forget the mantra. And then Om adhara shaktiye namaha. Om anantaya namaha. Om kurmaya namaha.
Oh.
So first one offers obeisance to Adhara Shakti, the supporting Shakti, and then to Ananta, and then to Kurma. And this is when you're establishing the asana. But this is interesting also from a historical perspective. You can look this up on Wikipedia. You can just search turtles all the way down. And there's a whole history to this notion. It was sometimes used by Europeans in a derisive way to speak about people of India, South Asia. Oh, they have strange ideas of cosmology, turtles all the way down. But that expression also goes back several hundred years. It's been used, at least 200 years, and they say possibly more. But it's become a kind of common expression there. I think it says it's used to express the idea of infinite regress.
Yes, Maharaj. So it seems that
you found.
Yes, infinite regress, and it says that it's 1830, as early as 1838 it goes, and Now, this background in Hindu mythology, and then the notable modern allusions or variations. In fact, but there also seems to be a book by that name. That was the first hit that came on Google when I look at it. So is the world turtle that is basically referring to Kurma Deva, or is it referring to something else?
Well, it's understood. But there's so many within what we call Vedic literature, broadly speaking. There's so many references to tortoise. And I was going to say there's another connection here, namely with Kashyapa. Kashyapa is the Prajapati, who is the son of Marichi, I believe.
Yes.
And he is the father of both Diti and Aditi. So he's the father of both the demons, the Daityas, and the Suras.
Yeah.
And Kashyapa is identified with Kurma.
Yes, I also heard about this. And so in fact, that is an alternate.
So it makes sense. So it makes sense if he's a Prajapati, because there's this notion of world creation, right, as having a foundation. And the foundation in this case is a tortoise, but is a Prajapati, and that Prajapati is creating the demons and the demigods.
Oh, okay. Beautiful. So in that sense, actually, when you say turtles all the way down, it is, although that might be used in a derogatory sense or a pejorative sense, but it has the idea is that ultimately the universe has to have a foundation. And if that turtle is transcendental, then he is the ultimate foundation. And even from a genealogical perspective, there is a Prajapati who starts everything. So
yeah,
it's quite
and all of this also points to the pastime of the churning of the ocean is actually also a creation story.
Creation story. How is that?
Well, it's creating so many different items.
Okay.
Ultimately, it's creating the nectar of immortality, but before that, so many items and persons and divinities are appearing. If we don't say creation, then recreation, because okay, the world is already there, the ocean is there, the earth is there already, but it's a further creation. It's a kind of visarga.
Yes.
That's happening through an effort of churning. And this churning, I want to say, is also echoing an activity in the yajna ritual, and that is the creation of fire. In the yajna, how do they make fire? They churn with arani wood and the other, and that by that friction, fire is created. So this is another churning that goes on. And as far as the structure of the Bhagavatam goes, I think it's also significant. You know how much I like mandalas and yantras.
Yes.
So this is a kind of mandala that's being described. And, it's the center pole within a mandala. And Kurma is we can say completing that mandala, or making the foundation of the mandala, out of which then the churning process of churning Krishna Katha can take place.
That's a lot to process. Can you elaborate that a little bit more? Maybe before that.
Yeah, well,
can you just,
I'm jumping into something allegorical a little
that's
bit.
fine. Just before that, Maharaj,
But
in general, maybe for Prabhupada doesn't talk so much about mandalas directly in his purports. So maybe
right.
we do use the word Vraja Mandala or Governmental Parikrama. So can you just briefly explain mandala in this context, and then we can go deeper into.
Well, the word mandala, a Sanskrit word, simply means circle. And we see quite a fair number of circles in the Bhagavatam. There's one mandala is hinted at in the first canto with Naimisharanya. Naimisharanya is described as kind of a center point of the world or the universe. And then you have 60,000 sages, and they're all surrounding Sutta Goswami, who is, of course, speaking the Bhagavatam as he heard it from Shukadev Goswami. So that's a kind of mandala.
So
and then
just a minute. So are we saying here that the conception of the universe described there is a mandala with like Naimisharanya at the center of the universal wheel? Or are you talking about the sages were sitting in a mandala, or what exactly are you referring to here?
Well, we'd have to check exactly what it says. I don't have it in my mind.
Yeah.
But there's some notion of Naimisharanya being the center. It's the point at the center. So if it's the center, that means that implies something surrounding, right?
Okay, so that is a reference to mandala.
Implies.
Okay.
That's a kind of mandala.
Yes, that is true. Okay. Makes sense.
Okay, and then in the fifth canto, we have Buu Mandala.
Yes.
Described quite extensively with all the mountains and the seas. And that's very much a mandala. It's circular, and it also has square portions, and so on. So it's describing what looks very much like many classical yantras, which have both square, angular, and circular elements.
Okay.
So that's in the fifth canto. And then here, this is eighth canto.
Just 1 minute. How do you correlate yantra and mandala over here? Mandala is more a circle, and yantra can be various shapes, shapes which symbolize something.
Yeah, yantras can be in many shapes, but typically they will be a combination of square elements and circles. And there may be also triangles. It's, there's tantric yantras, especially in tantric traditions. They use a lot of yantras as tools for meditation. Tantric Buddhism, they use a lot of yantras. So I was going to say, in the eighth canto, then it seems to me that this pastime of churning the ocean is hinting at a kind of mandala. because of the way it's set up with Kurma and Sumeru and Vishnu, and then the churning process. And then in the 10th canto, of course, we have Rasa Mandala. So we can say that all the mandalas before we get to the 10th canto are preparing us for this 10th canto, the central mandala, the Rasa Mandala.
The Rasa Mandala is actually literally circular also. And then they dance in that formation. So it's fascinating. I never thought of how prevalent the mandala is even in the Bhagavatam. Okay.
And the Bhagavatam as a whole, I think, can be conceived as a kind of mandala where you read from first canto through the 12 cantos, you get to the 12th, you come to the end of the 12th canto, what do? You go back to the beginning of the first canto. So it's a circle. And in the center of the circle is the 10th canto. And you may say, wait, wouldn't it be canto 6 because there's 12? No, it's canto 10, certainly, because the focus is Krishna.
Yeah. So then, so you're saying that this would be more like a conceptual center rather than a chronological center. That 10th canto would be more of a, because it is, the whole Bhagavatam's heart is the 10th canto and Krishna.
Yeah, everything is leading up. It's either leading up to the 10th canto or relating to the 10th canto one way or another.
Yes.
Everything is a preparation or a reflection of, we can say, the 10th canto. We can see that if we, especially I think if we focus on rasa, we can see expressions of the feelings. The different rasas are manifested in the different relations with different avatars in the course of the Bhagavatam, and then it's all leading into the Maharasa of the Bhagavat, of the 10th canto.
That's beautiful.
For example, in the beginning of Canto 3, we meet Uddhava, and Uddhava has, just before meeting Vidura, he has been with Krishna. And now Krishna has left. We're only in the 3rd canto, but Krishna has left. So the time element is also interesting in the Bhagavatam. We get all kinds of reversals of time. We have different sorts of time. And what is his mood? He's feeling great pain of separation.
Yeah.
Because Krishna has just departed. So that viraha bhava is expressed in his memories of Krishna's pastimes, which he's summarizing in, chapters 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah. Remembrance of Lord Krishna. That's the chapter of those chapters, yes.
So you can also think of that as an anticipation of the 10th canto, anticipation of the gopis' feelings of separation.
Yes.
Anyway, back to Kurma and back to the churning.
Yeah.
So we can also think about how churning, Where else do we find churning happening in the Bhagavatam? Well, how about when in Damodar Leela, Krishna
Yes.
and Mother Yashoda is churning milk. So we can say that the whole churning episode in the 8th canto is an anticipation of that, of Krishna and Mother Yashoda and that Leela.
It's beautiful.
And that churning, the churning of the ocean of milk is, of course, creating a nectar, but the nectar of immortality, which then the demons and demigods are fighting over. And what does Krishna do with the nectar in the 10th canto?
Krishna eats the
He's
butter.
breaking the pots, he's stealing it, and he's giving it freely. He's giving it to the monkeys even.
Okay. So
it's an interesting inversion. It's a kind of inversion. In the 8th canto, it's all about who's in control and so on. It's about Dharma. The demigods are followers of Dharma. The demons are not followers of Dharma. And then Krishna, what does he do? He breaks the pot, very undharmic thing, and he's a thief, very undharmic.
So we could say that 8th canto churning is for establishing dharma, where the 10th canto churning it transcends dharma and it is for relishing prema. It is simply the reciprocation of love.
Yes, but in the 8th canto, the establishing of dharma is also kind of questionable, because what happens? Mohini Murti is, she's not keeping her word. What kind of dharma is that? She says she's going to distribute the nectar to everyone, and then she takes it and gives it to the demigods only.
Yes, that's true. And in fact, there is some anticipation of that before also, when Vishnu tells Indra that right now you are weak, so you make a truce with the demons and you churn the milk, churn the ocean, milk ocean, and then I think there the snake, there's that example of a
Vasaki?
of a rat and a snake, that person.
Yeah.
So the idea is that we use
the whole,
whoever makes the hole,
that
and
was,
then we
that
drive them away and
analogy.
use the hole. So in a sense, that is prefigured over there. So it some ways is similar to the Mahabharata. It seems in general, in times of like intense battles with the demons or demoniac forces, sometimes the ethos seems to be more of contextual ethics, that sometimes the ends justify the means. So like Krishna has Karna killed in a particular way, or Bhishma or Drona killed in a particular way. So even Duryodhana.
Yes.
So we could say that the end is establishing dharma. The means themselves may not be exactly dharmic, but at least at the end of that whole narrative, the devatas do gain power, and it's by the 10th, 11th chapter of the 8th canto, the demons are killed, and then after that, Shukracharya performs a yajna by which he revives Bali Maharaj, and then after that, the Vamandev pastime starts. So that churning, it's significant. So you said that the theme of Mandala is recurrent in the Bhagavatam, and churning is also recurrent in the Bhagavatam. Now, I just missed, how did you correlate Mandal and churning? Are you saying that the ocean is, what is the Mandal over there?
Again, we have a center point, a kind of bindu in the churning rod.
Okay.
And they're circling around, they're pulling Vasuki, they're surrounding, and so on. So that's also a kind of mandala, to some.
That's true. It just struck me right now. It's not an entirely similar thing, but just as Krishna is a non-combatant in the Mahabharata Kurukshetra war, which is for establishing dharma, similarly, Kurma is not exactly non-combatant, but he is non-active. But although Krishna in one sense does everything, at all the critical moments he's there to help, and without him the war couldn't have been won. So similarly, although Kurma, he's, as you said earlier, he's a silent avatar, but still he is maintaining everything and is ensuring that everything happens.
And it's also it's also described that the Lord expands his energy into the demons and the demigods to facilitate the pastime.
And into Vasuki also. So into
Vasuki also.
Vasuki makes him inactive. And then the devatas are energized with the mode with sattva, and the asuras with rajas. And it's interesting, basically they are pulling from both sides. So it seems that sattva and rajas, from a functional point of view, can equate each other. Although sometimes we say sattva might be too contemplative, but here the devatas are having sattva, but they both balance the churning and they keep churning. So it seems that, in a sense, that the mode doesn't necessarily affect the energy level. The mode is more about how we conduct ourselves or what is the disposition. So even in sattva, a person can have as much energy as in rajas, but the person will not be that attached or that entangled. The mentality will be different. The activity level can be the same.
Yes, you could put it like that. But in this case, I wonder how, although we say that the devas are sattvic, I wonder how sattvic they were in this particular occasion, because they were very much motivated to gain the nectar, the amrit.
Yeah, that is true.
And you can say they were quite attached to getting it.
That's true, yeah.
So much so that when when Rahu tried to intercept, he lost his head. They didn't waste time. They just off with his head.
But wasn't that Mohini Murti? It is not the devatas exactly.
Yeah.
Mohini Murti cut off her head. Yeah. So now the devatas, did they want the nectar to become stronger or just to live? Because normally the soma, they say that they drink it so that they can prolong their lifetime, usually. But here, the nectar was so that they could become stronger, isn't it? And then when they become stronger, that's how they were able to defeat the demons.
Oh, is that what it says? I thought. Okay, I thought, they understand that this is amrita, so this is going to give us immortality.
Okay.
I don't remember now.
Yeah, because what I do remember is that even with the amrita, because I'm just looking at, okay, I'll just share this screen. Even with the amrit, they are not exactly immediately able to win the war. Because even then there is a battle between the demigods and the demons. And although the devatas win initially, but after that, it seems that they start they start losing. And that's when it seems that in chapter 10, chapter 11, again the Lord appears on the battlefield. And then at the end of chapter 10, and he kills some of the prominent demons. And then Indra becomes enlivened. And then Indra kills all the demons. So the Lord appears many times in this chapter, or in this whole pastime.
Yeah. And in general, we can say it's all part of the back and forth of the demons and the demigods.
Yes.
Which if we take allegorically again, we can say this is always our internal battle.
Yes. It's actually it's an internal battle, and it's also an external battle. Like the external world also, even if there are always godly and ungodly forces, and there is no there's no final solution. There is establishing dharma is more of balancing rather than eliminating.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, I had two, three thoughts about this. So when Kurma, so at these pastimes of the Lord, there is a functional aspect to it, or I don't know whether functional is the right word, or you could say there is a aspect of the Lord doing a particular, fulfilling a particular function or purpose in the world, and there is a transcendental aspect to it. So from a functional perspective, he is bearing the burden of the Mandara Parvat, and he is ensuring the churning happens. From the transcendental perspective, it is said that actually the churning, it gives the Lord a very pleasant tickling sensation. It's like somebody, they can't reach their back and tickle, and they have some scratch. So in the Jayadev Goswami's prayers, it is said that there is because of the churning on his back, a small depression is created by the mark of the Mandara. So, but the depression doesn't seem to be, it seems to be like a pleasant experience for him. So there is a functional aspect and there's a transcendental aspect. Even while carrying a whole mountain on his back. So now when we say he's stabilizing, it is resting on him and then they are pulling. So the burden is definitely to some extent on him. The weight is on him.
Yes.
So the Vasuki is actually, they're not, the rope.
You can say.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Well, another point is just that the Lord is taking the humble position by going down to the lowest place and supporting and facilitating the whole pastime. He's taking the humble position. He's stepping down, avatara. He's coming down to take a lowly form in a lowly position. So we can take this also as a glorification of the Lord, that he's quite ready to take such a position. The demons were upset because they wanted to, initially they were positioned in the back to pull the back of Vasuki. And they said, no, we want to be at the head because the head is the important place. And then, okay, you can, whatever, okay, you can take that place if you like. And then, of course, they suffer from the fire and the smoke coming out of Vasuki. Incidentally, I think we have to really also appreciate how much humor there is in this pastime. There's an awful lot of humor. Oh yeah, I mean, especially how the demons are are represented. They're very childish, especially in this point. Oh, we want the front, not the back. Doesn't matter front or back, but they have to have the front. Okay, take the front. And then just the whole scene, if you picture it, it's actually quite humorous. There's a tortoise, there's this mountain, there's these demigods and demons. What are they pulling? Not a rope, they're pulling a snake. There's Vishnu on top with 1,000 arms. And then when it's all over and there's the trouble with the poison, and then they call in Shiva and he has to help them out. And then when finally the nectar comes, the fight over the nectar, and then Mohini completely bewilders the demigods. Again, it's a comedy.
Yeah,
it's a complete comedy. How you can just picture them sitting there with their mouths hanging open, staring lustily at Mohini Murti.
Yeah.
And then it's humorous how Mohini Murti tricks them. It's just one thing after. It's a real comedy.
Yeah, that's true. I never thought the Mohini part I had thought of, but the earlier part also, yes, it's true. It's somebody's proud and possessive, and then they become embarrassed by that, by trying to grab the top position. That's fascinating. There's also one more thing, in the Christian tradition, they talk also about how Jesus picked up the cross. And they often say that we all have to pick up our cross in life. We all have responsibilities, challenges, burdens. So here it's Kurmadev it's not a small cross, it's a mountain he's picking up. So the idea of carrying a burden, it's a huge burden to carry the whole mountain. And he does that for establishing for the purpose of like you said, humbly taking that role for the purpose of benefiting those who are actually his servants. The devatas are his servants, but he's benefiting them.
Yeah, exactly.
And now
you mentioned the transcendental purpose before of scratching the itch on his back. And of course, this points to the multi-purpose of the Lord, that the Lord fulfills multiple purposes in all of his pastimes. And in this case, one of them we may say is a selfish purpose, but the selfish purpose is, we could say, quite trivial. I mean, when we feel some itch on our back, we just get something and we scratch and that's it. And it's not part of cosmic history. But when the Lord has an itch, when the Lord has an itch on his back, it becomes part of it's a cosmic event. It has to be scratched.
Amazing. Yeah. So, I remember His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj, one of the first classes that I heard from him, he was talking about how, Krishna sometimes when he gets angry, he goes to a place where he wants to get some butter and the butter is hidden. He will get angry and he will disrupt the place, and sometimes he'll pass urine at that place. So there at that time, Maharaj said that how many times in your life have you passed urine? And who bothers about it? Who keeps account about it? But when Krishna does it, that gets reported in the Bhagavatam. So
yes. Yeah.
So
divine urination.
Divine urination. Yeah, amazing. And so now this churning which happens, is there any now at the end of it they get, there is a poison and then we get the nectar. Now in some ways that represents the process of purification of the heart. What Krishna also says in the Bhagavad Gita, initially there is what tastes like poison initially will taste like nectar eventually. So so while at that point their purpose is more to get nectar for surviving in this world, or for flourishing in this world. But that process, it remarkably parallels the process of purification and the process of attainment of Krishna prema. That there are obstacles, like there is poison, and there are also fringe benefits. And it seems the devatas take the fringe benefits, they allot it, devatas and the asuras, but the key thing is they don't get distracted by it. They take the fringe benefits, but they keep churning. So similarly, when we churn our heart, we face a lot of problems, and we also get some, we may get some fame, we may get some following, we may get some good things also. Now the devatas don't reject the good things, but they accept the things, but they keep churning. So while that process is for a, we could say, a mundane purpose, but it seems the process is very similar to the process for getting Krishna prema also in our heart.
That's certainly the case. But it's interesting that when the poison comes out first, what do? They immediately turn to Lord Shiva. And Shiva he's in his own category. He's not Jiva Tattva, he's not Vishnu Tattva, he's not one of the demigods, one of the regular demigods. He's Shiva.
Yes.
And his position, as described in the Bhagavatam, is a kind of embodiment of compassion toward everyone. He is completely equal to everyone. He seems to be even more equal than Vishnu, in the sense that Mohini Murti is going to be partial to the demigods, but Shiva is impartial because he accepts the poison for the benefit of everyone.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And he's also, if we wanted to make a connection with, I don't know if we want to, but with Christianity, because the emphasis there is on divine suffering. So here we have a case of voluntary divine suffering. He says, okay, I'll drink the poison because we should always do things for the benefit of others. And he asks Bhavani, his wife, for her approval. And she approves, but not before he's already decided that he's anyway going to do it.
That's interesting. When you talk about that drinking of poison, that's beautiful. And Jesus also, in the Bible, he says that let the cup pass. So it does seem that at that time, one of the ways of killing a person was giving them a cup of hemlock. And that's how Socrates was killed. So, but then the next day, he's given a more severe form of execution, not just a poison, but he's put on the cross and crucified. But the idea of drinking a cup of poison, or that seems to be there in the Greco-Roman tradition, where Jesus, in the context of which Jesus spoke. So, of course, here there is no cup, but there is concentrated poison which he gets in his hands and he drinks it. So, yes, this is a beautiful parallel, because one of the things which Christians often say is that God came as Jesus and he suffered like we have to suffer, like we suffered in the world. So, in that sense, he demonstrates his empathy for us. So, but then we have Lord Shiva also doing that. And
Yeah, I don't know how much they would accept that parallel, but there's a kind of parallel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not exactly he descending to like having a whole lifetime to suffer, go through worldly existence, but yes, that drinking poison is serious.
Yeah.
And so it's also there that Kurma, after that, he just, after the churning is done, he disappears. There is no like expressing thanks, no expressing prayers,
Yeah.
no expressing appreciation. So it's almost he doesn't speak and nobody speaks to him also. It's
Yeah, he's very mysterious.
yes. So it's almost like for most people, God's presence in their heart, they don't speak to God and God doesn't speak to them, or they don't hear God speaking to them.
Yeah.
Although God is sustaining the lives of everyone, but
Yeah.
so that's interesting. Now, I was thinking that there are Kurma temples, although not many temples of Kurma Dev. There are some temples of Kurma, and it's I think the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a mention of Ramanujacharya finds himself in a Kurma temple, and he thinks it's a Shiva temple, so he stops. So he decides that I don't want to I didn't want to go to Shiva temple, so he fasts over there. So Kurma is also worshipped, but that worship doesn't seem to be very extensive. Like say we have Krishna worship or Ram worship. There are few temples, but not many. And then just a few more parallels, that Kurma is in the Bhagavad Gita, there is the metaphor of Kurmo Angani Sarvashaha. Like a tortoise, all the yogi withdraws all the limbs. So is there any description of the limbs of Kurma Dev also? That the shell is mentioned, but there is not much further mention about anything else in whatever architecture I have seen in various temples, traditional temples. They do depict Kurmadev with his limbs, but the Bhagavatam is that way quite silent about his description. So that hard shell protects.
Well, of course. Yeah. The Bhagavatam is very much a summary. Many things are just summarized. So I suppose there would be something in the Kurma Purana, no?
Yes, that is
you would
true.
think if it's called Kurma Purana, there must be a lot about Kurma Dev there.
Yeah, makes sense. Is Kurma Purana one of the... Oh, it is one of the 18 Mahapuranas also. I'm just looking at it.
I think it is, yeah.
Yes. And now, at some places he's referred to as a tortoise avatar, some places he's referred to as a turtle avatar. So he's referred to as the Lord Turtle or Lord Tortoise. Prabhupada uses both words. So it seems tortoises are more land.
Yeah.
Turtles often they are more equipped for being in the waters.
Oh, I don't know about that distinction.
Okay.
I thought they're kind of interchangeable words in English. I don't know.
Yeah, it seems that biologically they are more suited for water, staying in water.
Okay.
Yeah. And
but they are amphibious.
Yeah, that's true. They are amphibious. And then there is one more reference, not exactly to a turtle, but when Lord Chaitanya goes into ecstasy, he sometimes withdraws all the limbs of his body. And then he becomes...
isn't there even a term for that? sort of Kurma Bhava or something like that.
Yeah, I remember that. I don't remember the exact term, but yes, in Bengali they use the word for that. And this is so. In the devotees also, I think the devotees also mentioned that now, Lord, you are manifesting kurma or something like that.
Yeah.
So now this theme of stability for a devotee, that idea that worshipping kurma will bring stability, is that have you read whether that's an enduring theme in our tradition, or was it for specifically for Bhaktivinoda Thakur it was mentioned? Let me say if devotee.
I only know it from what you have mentioned already, from Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur.
Okay.
Which doesn't mean it's not there elsewhere, but that's the only place I've heard. But it's kind of reasonable, right?
Yes.
The idea of getting stability by worshiping the stable form of the Lord. It's an interesting idea. Maybe we need that for, maybe we should have a Kurma temple for ISKCON to worship for stability of our society.
That's a amazing thought. We have Narasimha temple for protection. We have a Narasimha deity for protection.
Yeah.
And protection is, we could say, more from like overt dangers. But stability is a different kind of protection. So yeah, in the material world, something is always happening, and in our movement also, things keep happening. So yeah.
Actually, I would say stability and balance, because something we seem to be challenged by a lot in our society is finding balance, especially when there's some point of disagreement. Then we find different extremes, and everyone wants to be over here or over there. So maybe we should be worshiping Kurma to get that balance between the different perspectives.
Yeah. So stability and balance, yeah. It's a big challenge that when we start prioritizing one thing, it seems almost that to emphasize one thing, it's almost like we have to not just de-emphasize, de-emphasize, but even deride the other things, which is done. Yeah, that's true. And that also happens, not just with opinions. I think it also happens with projects. Sometimes we take a big project, and then the devotees are neglected, sadhana is neglected, and so many other things get neglected by that. Balance. It's beautiful.
Now, another way we could think about this pastime of the churning is in terms of world politics today. And as we know, Vishnu advises the demigods that they should cooperate with the demons to accomplish their purpose. And it seems like this is good advice for the world today also, that we may see ourselves in this party or that party, but maybe we need to find ways to really come together to cooperate for the benefit of everyone. It seems like present day politics has become so dysfunctional. Of course, I'm thinking especially in America because I'm from America. But I was also thinking of the present pandemic in terms of the poison. So taking a different way of reflecting on this pastime, it may be said that the over endeavor of all the powerful beings of this world, all of the corporate managers and everything, in a way has produced this this pandemic. Just the whole industrial complex has generated this pandemic, and the question in my mind is how is Lord Shiva going to manifest to swallow the poison?
Beautiful.
Or is he going to appear? Or is he saying, no, this is Kali Yuga, forget it. You're going to have to suffer.
True. We could, so now, in one sense, there has been it's not just, you could say, industrial complex, but there is also everything that associates with it. Zoonosis is resulted because of the industrialization of the meat industry. And we have literally, we could say we humans have, maybe usually the word churning has a positive connotation to bring up something better from it. But we have more like disrupted the nature. So, but maybe by the Lord's grace, something good can come out of the bad also. So maybe the poison will be removed and something positive will come. Now, when Prabhupada was asked about the possibility of a third world war, sometimes he said that, there's always trouble in this world. A third world war won't necessarily make people more spiritual. But then he also said that if we are prepared for it and we continue our Krishna consciousness, then people will be attracted. So do you see overall, because of the pandemic, say some kind of increased spiritual exploration, or at least questioning about the meaning of progress or the meaning of life among people today?
I like to think so. Because recently I've come across some analysis from some two psychologists who are in the field of what's called positive psychology. And they are identifying different kinds of emotional strengths. And one category they call strengths of transcendence.
Interesting.
And for this category, they have 5 subcategories. And the first subcategory is appreciation of beauty. The second is gratitude. The third is hope. And the fourth one, I'm not remembering right now. The fifth one is a sense of spirituality, by which they mean simply some acknowledgement of transcendence, of there being a reality beyond matter. That's a very minimal understanding. Anyway, my point is just that one of these features is hope. And so I like to try to cultivate hope in the midst of so much that one could feel hopeless about. And so to answer your question, yes, I hope so. I hope people are becoming more reflective, more thoughtful. I think there are any number of very insightful people who understand a lot about what's wrong with what's going on. And that's a good thing. We should appreciate and encourage whatever shows, even if we say, oh, that's just mode of goodness thinking. Well, we could use a lot of mode of goodness in this world. We can say that's what Dharma is about. Establishing Dharma is about bringing people up from the lower modes to the higher modes. And of course, ultimately to Krishna, but step by step.
Yeah, that's true. And in one sense, while the Bhagavatam or the Vedic conception of history is circular, so in a sense, nothing improves, things go round and round. But actually, there is hope within it because the consciousness can become elevated. The Lord comes and delivers. And even when things go down too much, the Lord restores them to order even in this world. So there is definitely reason for hope and positivity. Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. So
no, it's also been said we cannot live without hope. We may have nothing else, but if we have hope, we can live.
yes. Now, hope is also strongly associated with a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
That when there is some kind of purpose, then there is, okay, I can be a part of things will be better, and I can be a part of a small way, a part of making things better. So
yeah, Viktor Frankl talks about that.
yeah,
Logotherapy.
yes, that's true. Yes, ma'am. So we need Kurma Dev to bring stability. We need Lord Shiva also to remove the poison, and we can hope for the nectar to come too. So maybe the nectar would be probably some kind of not just a vaccine to cure the disease, but maybe some understanding that leads to a higher consciousness. Where
that is what is wanted. Yes.
yeah, at the very least, if we start, if we become more conscious of nature and life forms, and say even stop having such indiscriminate animal slaughter, and because most of the last pandemics have come from zoonosis, so even the lesser killing of animals, that could also be a significant step forward in the evolution of consciousness. Yes, Maharaj.
Yes, could certainly be. Let's hope for a revolution in this regard, not just a small change.
Yes, Maharaj, certainly. I hope for that. Thank you.
As Srila Prabhupada was saying, as Prabhupada was saying about the Bhagavatam, it can bring about a revolution in the impious lives of the people.
Yes, that's true. Yes, Maharaj. Was any concluding points you would like to? I don't want to take too much of your time. Or any concluding points you want to add, or should I try to summarize? It's a very diverse discussion. We had.
Yeah, we went sort of all over the universe this time. No, you go ahead and make your famous summary. You're good at that.
I don't know how good I can be today, but yes, I'll try. So we started with the special features of Kurma Dev. So we talked about how it seems that he doesn't speak. So as I said, he's a very silent avatar, and there are no prayers also offered to him. And then we started a lot of discussion we had on the non-literal aspects. So Kurma Dev is worshipped for stability was recommended by Bhakti Thakur to Bhakti Thakur. So in that, we discussed about how Prabhupada, while presenting Krishna Bhakti in a relevant way, in a context where say, Mahatma Gandhi and others were reducing it to myth or like a pious myth, Prabhupada spoke strongly about the literal understanding. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, while addressing Bankim Chandra Chatterjee's attempts to bowdlerize Krishna Lila, and to present things. He gave people a way to understand it non-literally, but also emphasize that there's ultimately it has to be realised at transcendental level. So we discussed about the about various so allegory. This is more of an allegory. Metaphor would be more of a particular point of parallel, whereas allegory is a narrative which in which certain abstract properties are personified to teach something. So Chaitanya Chandrodaya Natak is like allegory. At least there are allegorical characters in that. And then with respect to the Bhagavatam's first canto, the bull and the cow narrative, you said that how there is a blurring of categories and the emphasis is on remembering and relishing Krishna. And so depending on, even the acharyas don't talk so much about whether this is allegorical or not. So depending on historical context, certain things which we may consider very important, in maybe 200 years down, others may think that something else is very important. So rather than focusing on what is considered contextually important, we can be more saragrahi, be essence seeking and focus on remembering the Lord. And then before that, you mentioned how there are not only multiple avatars present in this, but multiple avatars are cooperating in this pastime. Then we discussed that it sees Parshuram interacts with Ram. Then in the spiritual world, there seems to be some awareness of at least Dwarka and Vrindavan. But whether there is interaction between the various lokas and the various devotees, that's something which we don't have clear mention. And then you mentioned about Mandala and Yantra. So the Kurma being present with the churning rod above him, that is like a mandala. And then we have the mandalas in the first canto where Naimisharanya is considered to be like the center of the universe. Then we have Buu Mandala in the fifth canto, and of course we have Ras Mandala in the 10th canto. And then we discussed also about the idea of the universal turtle or the turtles all the way, that in our tradition there is, if you consider Kurma to be the supreme lord, and then Kashyapa is the Prajapati. So from the Prajapati everything comes. So and Kashyapa and then Kurma sustains everything. So in that sense, there is a parallel over there. We also discussed a lot about in detail about how when Kurma appears, so there is the churning in the 8th canto and there is the churning in the 10th canto. The churning in the 10th canto of the butter is Krishna is unificently distributing the butter. That is more for like relishing prema. And in the 8th canto, it seems to be more for establishing dharma, although it's more for the purpose of establishing dharma. And sometimes the ends are considered more important than the means. And I never thought of this point, that this whole depiction is quite humorous. How the demons are sometimes very like childishly demanding. We want to hold on to the mouth, and then they get overwhelmed by the smoke, and then they see Mohini Murti and they're bewildered by her. And then there was we talked some cross-cultural parallels, that Kurma is sustaining the earth, sustaining the whole existence. He's humble below everyone. So in the Christian tradition, they have the idea of lifting up the cross. The Lord is lifting up the mountain himself. And then there is the idea of drinking poison. So Lord Shiva takes the poison. So there's the idea of divine suffering. And Lord Shiva, he is, in one sense, Mohini Murti is partial to the Devatas, but Lord Shiva drinks poison for the benefit of everyone. So he's neither Jiva, he's in a higher category. So he's like the divine. So he exhibits the divine munificence in an extraordinary way. And then when we talked about Kurma for stability, and you brought in this broader meanings of how in our movement we need stability and balance, so that we don't get too fixated on one opinion and condemn the other opinion, or we don't get fixated on one project and neglect other aspects while pursuing that project. And even in the world today, the politics, there is so much polarization and politics is dysfunctional. just as the Lord told the Devatas and Asuras to come together. So today also people, that is a good advice for political leaders also to come together. And then lastly, just as during the churning, poison came out, and then which Lord Shiva was needed. So it seems the way we have not exactly churned but disrupted the universe by industrialization. So the pandemic could be like a poison, but whether Lord Shiva will come and remove the poison, that is something which we'll have to wait and see. We can pray, and that there is also stability, that the world becomes more stable, and we can. And you talked about positive psychology and hope, and how we cannot live without hope. And there is also the aspect of there is spirituality, there is hope, there is gratitude, there's humor. So it does seem that this whole pandemic is making people think about higher consciousness and say the meaning of life, the definition of progress. And if we have not just a evolution, but a revolution of consciousness, then there will be then there can be brighter times which can come. And just as Lord Kurma Dev, he was invisible. He was not exactly. He didn't speak, but he was there sustaining everything. So Kurma is present. We can say in the process of churning of the heart, also process of churning of the milk ocean, parallels the process of churning of the heart for the manifesting of love of Krishna. So we can pray that humanity individually and collectively, their heart gets churned and we can rise to a higher consciousness. So thank you, Mara. This was a breathtaking journey, what you took us on today.
Well, thank you for participating. Together we did some churning. There, by the way, it's a detail, but there is one more mandala, you can say, in the Bhagavatam that I thought of in the 6th canto, when Chitraketu Maharaj meets Lord Shiva. He sees Lord Shiva with Parvati on his lap, and they are surrounded by the sages.
Oh, okay.
So that's a kind of mandala also. And of course, that's the beginning of more trouble for Chitraketu. He thinks it's very funny that this is, we can picture that scene, all these sages, and then Shiva, highly respected, but then Parvati is sitting on his lap. What is this? So he can't help it. He laughs. And of course, Parvati doesn't think it's funny at all. And her not seeing the humor in it is also funny. The fact that she doesn't see any humor in it, and in fact, she is offended and she curses Chitraketu, is also kind of humorous. And of course, Chitraketu very graciously accepts the curse. He says, okay, heaven or hell, whatever.
Yeah.
So I just thought that's another mandala.
Yes, I think even in the 10th canto, when Krishna is sitting with the Gopas to have lunch and Brahmaji sees them, that's also
Oh, yes, that's the other.
Yeah.
That's also a mandala. Yeah.
Yes. So
yeah, good to remember that.
Bhagavatam is rich with this. I never thought of this dimension of mandala this way. Thank you very much, Maharaj, for your time.
Yeah.
And your Sangha.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All the best. So we'll proceed next time with Varahadev, huh?
Yes, Maharaj, definitely. I look forward to that.
Okay.
Humble obeisance. Thank you.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai. Gaur Premanande. Haribol.
Thank you, Maharaj.